Today we're going to pack this Corsair Air 540 cube case full of graphics cards. To do that, we will need to float one in this nice big window. This animation is brought to you in part by this third graphics card. The process of installing a floating GPU in your computer may be a bit different than this one. Regardless, some of the steps I cover throughout this video may be helpful in your own build. So first question is, why do this? Other than the fact that it looks cool, I needed to fit 3 graphics cards into my computer and there was not enough space for the third. Manufacturers often don't prioritize motherboard layouts for this sort of thing. I happen to have this flimsy old case laying around, so I decided to cannibalize it. The part I was after was the expansion slot. 3 slots were trimmed off and properly deburred. A quick pause for this most satisfying action. The old PC case was not designed in a way where I could just cut the slots off and reuse them for my intended purpose. Of the 3 slots I initially trimmed off, only 2 would actually fit in the new case. I had planned for the 3rd slot to be my mounting location, so I had to make an additional flange. More sparks flew. There were already holes in one of the pieces, so I marked their centers and drilled out the corresponding side. The 2 parts were joined with some pop rivets. Here is the completed bracket. Attaching the card to the bracket helped to locate the position of the 3rd hole. Normally, the tabs that stick out the back of the GPU would slide in behind the motherboard. That part of the case no longer exists, so a 3rd screw will have to hold it in place. All of these holes can be drilled by hand. The press just helps to keep everything firmly aligned. Using a hand tap, I added some threads. After a fair amount of searching, I found this PCI-express extender. The reviews for a lot of the other cheap cables I came across included things like, "This item melted my motherboard." So this particular one was pricey, but it has worked well for 3 years now. Based on the flex of the cable, I found a position to mount the card. Unfortunately, it was so high that it interfered with the rear fan. That meant one hole was already done, but it created a few other issues at the same time. More on that in a minute. Because there was already a functioning PC inside of my case, I didn't want to drill the new holes. One of the worst things you can do to a computer is blast metal shavings all over it. Don't do that. Have you ever wondered what a hole punch mashing into a graphics card sounds like? Well, now you know. Back to the rear fan issue. There was no way that I was going to go without this fan. I think it's an essential component for cooling, so a minor modification was needed. Yes, I put it on the outside. Insert your judgments in the comments. The rest of the assembly went smoothly. Installation complete. I should note that this particular setup is not actually running SLI for a number of reasons. One is that there is no SLI cable long enough to connect the floating card to the lowermost card. If the floating card was mounted 2 inches lower, this wouldn't be a problem. SLI setups are not as popular as they used to be, and I'm not actually using these cards for gaming, but rather for GPU rendering. If SLI is enabled, the rendering software instantaneously crashes, so in this case, it's a non-issue. It is also worth noting that this setup won't work for a computer with a single GPU because there is no access to the ports on the back of the card through the case. You would need to make a much larger hole in order to make that work. It's kinda tight in here, but everything fits just fine. Fun fact, finishing this video took me so long I had time for an upgrade. It's definitely not a bad look, fancy even, if you don't include the fan mounted to the outside of the case. Most importantly, it works. At some point in the near future, I will be designing a case of my own from scratch. If you would like to see it, remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and have a great week.